Because I like you guys get to listen to me do this presentation for free. Everyone else had to pay $1,000. So this presentation, the paper for it is somewhere on the internet if you're interested. So I'm getting pictures taken of me. So so for an introduction to this presentation, this is a systematic literature review of the existing cybersecurity audit framework specifically targeted for the Internet of Things. Because a lot of auditing frameworks are predate when the Internet of Things really became a major concern. They often aren't really considered and can be forgotten. So, the Internet of Things often have a lot of security vulnerabilities because of a combination of several factors. Sometimes people just forget that they can be insecure. They have limited computing power compared to traditional devices, which limits them. And there's also, in most places, a lack of regulation around what should be required, like security-wise, of IoT devices. So a few places have introduced IoT security legislation where there's like some minimum standard of security for IoT devices manufactured or sold. Example is California, but in the state of California, there aren't any penalties specified for noncompliance. So it's interesting, like they're like, you need to do these things, but if you don't do these things, I don't know, nothing happens. The UK also has some IoT security legislation. They have specific financial penalties, and if I remember right, it's based off the revenue of the organization up to a certain amount. So as these IoT security legislation laws become more common, as more places are implementing them. The UK one kicked in earlier this year. Oregon also has one now. IoT security audits will likely be more common, so there'll be more need for some sort of standard of IoT security audits so that stakeholders who read an audit report know what they are actually getting. So some questions that the research intended to answer is: what areas of IoT auditing have received the most attention? What aspects of IoT auditing are in the greatest need of future research? What practices can security auditors implement to improve IoT audit effectiveness and efficiency? And what can users and manufacturers of IoT devices do to improve IoT security? If this works. There. All right. So, a few specific laws that relate to this, that could lead to an organization conducting an IoT security audit. Like there's the aforementioned California bill, and then there's also Oregon House Bill 2395. The European Union Cyber Resilience Act specifies some stuff for IoT. The U.S. IoT Cybersecurity Improvement Act of 2020 is a big one in the U.S. It's not a general law, but it does require NIST to come up with security standards for IoT devices sold to federal agencies. It doesn't say what those standards are, but it says they should exist. So they will exist and probably be tested on. So continue background, some background on auditing and the existing auditing frameworks and such. Audits of internal controls, such as security controls, can basically be categorized as either risk-based or compliance-based. So a compliance-based audit looks at some sort of like regulation or checklist, like maybe we're looking at like NIST 800 something or another, and you're like, okay, these are these requirements. We're going to go down the list and see if all those requirements are met. So that's compliance based. You're complying with a specific law, regulation, or policy. A risk-based audit, which is what this paper mostly focuses on, is more tailored to a specific organization, their industry, their risks, because every organization's risk profile is different. So obviously, there's a risk of non-compliance, and that's important, but there could be things that aren't covered by existing laws as well. So an organization may be perfectly compliant with laws and still have massive security issues. A few regulations that can prompt general audits of internal controls, which could include ILT, are the Sarbanes-Oxley Act of 2002, which applies to publicly traded companies, and it's what's called an integrated audit, so they get both a financial statement audit and an audit of internal controls over financial reporting. So if it affects the financials, it's subject to SOX. Green Book for U.S. federal agencies, the Graham-Leach-Bliley Act for financial institutions, Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act for covered, healthcare providers, insurers, clearinghouses, etc. And the Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard, which is not like a law, but compliance with it is required by certain state laws, and it is required by major card companies. And General Data Protection Regulation in the EU are all prominent examples of regulations that can prompt an audit. Many of these regulations do not actually directly mention IoT devices. Many of them are quite old. People didn't really think about them. IoT devices weren't as common. So a lot of things come down to how do we do this? Here's methodology for my literature survey. You can read the paper and read about the methodology because it's really boring. Here's a list of the papers I reviewed. I reviewed 15 papers. Originally it was 14, but there was one published since the original draft of my paper was written. So these are all here. Again, this is listed in the paper. I can send you the list if you're interested in them. So the key themes of these papers are how IoT security frameworks influence IoT security auditing frameworks. Example of that paper was the Automated Standard-Based Security Assessment for IoT. So that would be an IoT security framework, like maybe a ISO or NIST framework. Obviously, compliance with that would be a major concern for a lot of organizations, prompt them to think about IoT security in general. So a security auditing framework could be designed to align with a security framework so that they can say, all right, this is good for auditing entities that need to be compliant with this. Or frameworks designed for specific context was another common theme. There were a few papers, especially that focused on healthcare settings, like medical IoT, etc. A few in industrial settings. Automation of auditing and related activities was a theme as well, because if you can't automate an activity unless you have a framework for how the activity should be conducted. So that was a common theme. And blockchain technology for IoT security auditing was featured in a few things as well because people like blockchain stuff. So analysis of results and untapped research areas here. There's no apparent widely used set of IoT security auditing standards. A few papers focused on healthcare, so there has been more of a push in getting things sorted out with healthcare, which makes sense because, like, when it comes to healthcare, the IoT devices, like, at that point, you're not just worried about, like, money or materials, you're also concerned about people's lives. Um, some untapped research areas are framework usefulness, like how useful are frameworks in actually conducting a more efficient and effective audit, uh, and then a comparison of existing frameworks, etc. Attitudes towards IoT security auditing. So, like, that would be attitudes of both, like, auditors themselves, like maybe auditors of internal controls, like IT auditors, internal auditors, etc. Um, how they see IoT security auditing, like, do they want a separate framework? Do they want existing frameworks to be altered? Attitudes of, like, management and employees of companies under audit, like, what do they think? Attitudes of stakeholders, like, are they able to, like, read and understand the resulting audit report? Is it useful to them? The relationship between IoT system assurance and general security assurance is the next, untapped or under examined research area. How does do we need to actually look at IoT auditing separate from security auditing in general? How big of a problem is it if it's not incorporated in current frameworks, if a problem, etc. Framework standardization is an issue. So, like, if you make a framework, that's all well and good, but if nobody is using the framework, then, or even if it's the best framework in the world, if nobody else is using the framework, it's not standardized, like, nobody else knows how good it is, and they don't know if, like, they can trust the results of an audit conducted according to that framework. IoT security auditing methodology and automation is another big one. Like, there was a little bit into automation, but a lot more research could be conducted into automation, especially if a good IoT security auditing framework is developed and accepted. That framework could then be used to as a basis for some automation of the some further automation of the auditing process. Industry specific versus general frameworks is another one. Like, a few of the frameworks papers we looked at, like, there was a framework for healthcare, a framework for industrial IoT. Like, does it make sense to have different frameworks for different industries? Or, because we're already looking at one specific, like, type of device, IoT, does it make more sense to have a general framework that can just, be then adjusted according to each entity's risk profile? And then the legislative effect of on IoT security. So many of the laws about IoT security are very new. So there hasn't been a lot of research into how much, if any, effect the new laws have on actual security of IoT devices and whether they help or not. So that'll be something to look at going forward in the future, especially as some laws like the one in California become a few years old now. Just to see, like, if there has been any, like, material impact on IoT security since they were implemented, and whether organizations are even compliant with that manufacture and sell IoT devices are even compliant with those laws in general. So now I have conclusions. Testing IoT is important, and research in IoT security auditing is underdeveloped. That much was fairly apparent. Users and manufacturers of IoT devices should be aware of new and upcoming regulations relating to IoT security and auditing, because they're going to apply to them, and they should consider implementing IoT security analysis using, like, things like dynamic risk analysis or framework specific to their industry. Like, you don't need to wait for there to be some sort of universal, widely accepted framework right now for you to start taking actions to secure your devices. IoT security auditing is an important issue, which is affected by regulations that developed before its rise to prominence, and also regulations that are being implemented in reaction to IoT security deficiencies. Like, a lot of regulation is very reactionary, so we're just going to get more and more of it as time goes on, at state level, national level, and in around the world. And IoT security auditing standards must enhance the reliability of IoT security auditing reporting while responding to changing technological and legislative landscapes. Needs to framework be needs to be specific enough to be useful and actually help um, conduct, an audit and result in an audit report comparable to other audit reports. But it also needs to be flexible enough that it's not just applicable to one specific regulation in one specific moment. All right, that's it. Any questions?